Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Walk Beside Me. I'm Brooklyn Bird, and I'll be talking today and every day about how the gospel of Jesus Christ applies to parenting. Today, I wanted to tackle a topic that I think will be valuable to any parent ever, and honestly, anyone who's in a relationship, and that is how to measure success as a parent. But this could also be applied to how you measure success in a relationship, in a marriage, in your relationship with a family member. First, I want to start by listing some ways that you might be tempted to measure your success as a parent by. And I'm going to talk about why these ways of measuring are not helpful. Some ways we might be tempted to measure our success as a parent would be what other people think about your kids, or whether they think you're a good parent, how your kids look or act. You might measure your success by their grades, their academic achievements, or their extracurricular achievements, whether they make it to a D1 college in a sport that you really care about. You might measure it by how obedient or compliant they are, how quickly they obey when you tell them to do something. Or you might measure your success by them hitting milestones, especially with babies. Parents do this. They compare their baby to other babies and they're like, oh, my baby's walking faster than theirs is. I must be taking such good care of my baby. You might measure it by your financial means, whether your children can have everything they want materially. This might be especially tempting for someone who grew up in a family that really struggled financially growing up. It might be tempting to measure your success as a parent based on whether your kids can have the things that you didn't get to have when you were little. Maybe you'll measure it by how many mistakes you make as a parent, whatever you think are mistakes, and whether you stop making those mistakes, or your child's mistakes. If your child keeps making the same mistakes over and over again, you might think that you're being unsuccessful. Another one might be you would measure it by how happy your child is. If your child is happy and smiley, you assume you're doing a good job. If they're sad, if they're angry, then you assume you're doing a bad job. The last one could be how much your children love you. If they love you, then you must be being a good parent. The problem with all of these ways of measuring success is that none of them are within your control. All of them depend on lots of external factors that lie either within your child's consciousness or even outside of your child. Whether your child does well in school might depend on what area of the country you live in and whether they even have good teachers at school. What people think of your child might depend on the culture that you're in and whether your child just happens to fit into that culture. Your child's milestone achievements depend on their personal development trajectory, which is so unique to each child. And so I want to encourage you today to measure your success as a parent by something that is 100% within your control, and that is your relationship with your child. When I say that, you might think, well, Brooklyn, a relationship is a two-way street. So my relationship with my child is not completely within my control. There's give and take on both sides of the relationship. At least as far as it goes with us measuring our own personal success in a relationship, it's helpful to define relationship this way. And that is how you relate to the other person in the relationship. A relationship doesn't depend on the other person's actions or behaviors or what they think of you. It's all about how you relate to the other person in the relationship, how you think and feel about that person. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to actually know whether the other person thinks or feels good about you. There have been times where I thought someone really didn't like me or something, and I felt like I had a really bad relationship with them. And then I found out later there was some other explanation for their behavior, and it's not that they didn't like me at all, and they actually thought they had a good relationship with me. The same thing has happened to me where I've had someone think that I was really mad at them or annoyed with them, and I definitely wasn't. I had personal things going on, and I thought I had a really good relationship with that person. And then come to find out they thought they had a bad relationship with me. Obviously, ideally, we're both on the same page about how our relationship is, but at the end of the day, we're never going to really know what's going on in someone else's head. It's not helpful to measure our success based on what they're thinking or feeling, and we have complete control over our own thoughts and feelings about someone, so that's what we should focus on. If you think and feel the way about your child that Jesus Christ does, you're successful. Jesus Christ loves every single person infinitely, no matter how many mistakes that person's made, no matter how much that person doesn't even want to have anything to do with God. Jesus Christ still has a good relationship with them because he relates to them in a loving, generous, compassionate way. His success is not dependent on whether they accept him or not. It is only dependent on the way that he relates to them. And Jesus Christ and God are always successful. We know that they're perfect. We see this in them, that it is possible to have a strong relationship with someone else, to relate to someone in a very positive way, even if they don't necessarily do the same thing with us. I wanted to show a scriptural example of this. I thought of the story of the prodigal son, which is in Luke chapter 15. I'll sum up most of the story and then I'll read some of the verses. This father had two sons. There's an older son and a younger son. The younger son asked the father, hey, give me my inheritance right now. He wanted to spend his inheritance right at that moment. So the father did. It wasn't very many days before the younger son had gone to a far country, spent all his money that his father had given him on what it says is riotous living. So probably not living that his father would have necessarily approved of. He ended up becoming extremely poor. The only way he could survive was going to these fields to feed swine. He became so destitute that he literally would have been happy to eat what the pigs were eating in order to survive, because that's how little money he had. That's how desperate he was. He realized, I could just go back to my dad and ask to be his servant. He's probably going to be upset with me. I messed up really bad, but even if I was just one of my dad's servants, then I would be eating better than I am right now. I'd be eating better than these pigs. So he went and he came to his father. When he was very far off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to his father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said, bring forth the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. So he instructed his servants to throw this giant party for his son. He said, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. There's more to the story, but that's so beautiful to see this father's compassion for his son. Verse 20 is very striking, and I'm going to read it again. This is when the son is approaching. It says, and he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. It just makes me think, would this father have acted this way if the whole time his son was gone, in the father's mind, he was thinking, oh man, I have such a bad relationship with my son. I'm a failure as a parent. I don't even know where he is. I failed. Everyone knows that my son has rebelled against me, and now I have this really terrible relationship with my son because he did all these things that I told him not to. If the father was thinking that way and he saw his son a far way off and saw his son approaching, do you think the father would have ran to him and had compassion and kissed him? I don't think so. The father probably would have seen his son coming and stayed inside and mentally prepared himself, like, oh, we're gonna have a really hard conversation. I hope he's coming here to apologize. If he's here to ask for more money, I'll tell him to get the heck out of here. That's how he would have been had he seen his son coming, if he thought he had a bad relationship with him and if he related to his child in this way. But instead, the whole time that child was gone, that son was gone, the father was still loving the son and still had compassion for him and was like, man, I think he's probably making a lot of mistakes right now. And those mistakes are probably causing him a lot of pain. He might have lost all the money I gave him, and he's probably struggling so much. And I just hope he knows he can come back here and I will help him because I love him. And I want to see him again. That father probably prayed for him. I think the father had a beautiful relationship with his son. He related to him in a beautiful way, even from afar, even when the son had completely rejected his father and everything his father had taught him. That father in the prodigal son story was a successful father because of the way that he related to his son, even when his son was doing everything wrong. This story is such a good analogy for what God is like. His love is always there. God has a beautiful, strong, powerful relationship with each and every one of his children. Even the ones who say they would never believe in God. Even the ones who say they hate God. Even the ones who are breaking every single possible commandment you can think of. God still loves them. He still relates to them in the same way that this father in the story did, where he's like, I'm so sad for them that they're causing themselves pain, and I hope someday they turn to me and find my love and experience relief. The only reason that we don't experience love from God sometimes isn't because he has a bad relationship with us, it's because we are not relating to him in the correct way. We're hiding from him because we don't want to follow him because it's too hard. Or we are relating to him in an untruthful way where we are trying to follow him, but we think he's not this merciful, loving being that he is, and we see him as this angry, stern father figure. If we're seeing him that way, we probably have a bad relationship with him because we're relating to him in the wrong way. And that doesn't mean that he's failing in the relationship. It means that we are not relating to him successfully. I hope this story shows how the father in the story to the prodigal son, could relate to his son in a successful way, in a godly way, even when his son had gone totally off the rails. And this father was still successful because he related to his prodigal son the way that God relates to us. And I want you to know that that's possible for you. You can be successful as a parent, even when your child is making every wrong choice possible, because of the way that you view your child, because of the way that you relate to your child. So now you might be wondering, okay, Brooklyn, well, how do I relate to my child the way that God relates to his children? The short answer is think and feel about them the way that Jesus Christ thinks and feels about them. It might be overwhelming to think of that, though. Sometimes just the phrase, what would Jesus do, it's so helpful, and it helps to have more specifics, right? I do think that the scriptures actually give more specifics about how we can know that our relationship with our children is successful, how we can know whether we are relating to them successfully. There's one verse of scripture that sums it up really well, and this is Doctrine and Covenants, section 4, verse 5. It says, "And faith, hope, charity, and love, with an eye single to the glory of God, qualify him for the work." I love this verse because it's saying your faith, your hope, your charity, and your eye single to the glory of God is what qualifies you for the work. In this section, it's talking about missionary work, but parenting is missionary work. We are ministers, we are pastors, we are missionaries to our children. This verse is really helping us know how to relate to those we minister to, and in this case, it means how to relate to our children. There are 4 attributes that come from this verse that I'm going to talk about, and those are faith, hope, charity, and an eye single to the glory of God. The verse also says love, but charity and love overlap a lot. So we'll just talk about faith, hope, charity, and an eye single to the glory of God. What does it mean to have faith in the way that we relate to our children? One seminal verse about faith is Alma 32:21. It says, "And now as I said concerning faith, faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if ye have faith, ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true." When I think about this verse in relation to my children and how I want to relate to my children, it means when you see your child screaming or hitting or fighting, it might be really hard to see physically. In fact, there's no physical manifestation of the fact that your child is actually a child of God with infinite potential, and that your child could become the most powerful being. We are all God's in embryo, and it might be really hard in that moment to see your child as divine. But when we relate to our children as faith, we see that despite their behavior, no matter what we see on the outside, we hope for things which are not seen, which are true. And the truth is that our children are divine. They have limitless potential. Nothing they do can diminish that potential. And so we believe strongly in their potential no matter what they do. We never give up on them. When your child pushes another kid at the playground, you don't say to yourself, "Oh, my child's mean," or "My child's bad." You say, "My child is a divine being who may have acted in an unkind way, but that's not who they are. I see their potential no matter what they do." And by doing that, you're going to help your child see that potential, and they will start acting in alignment with that potential because you've shown it to them. And they will start having faith in it too, even when they make mistakes and don't act in alignment with that potential. The second one is hope. Hope overlaps with faith a lot, but I think there's some nuance here. In the Bible dictionary, it says that hope is the confident expectation of and longing for the promised blessings of righteousness. While faith can be pretty specific, like when I think about relating to my child with faith, I think about having a vision of their potential even when I can't see it with my earthly eyes. When I think about hope, I think a little more broadly and just this confident expectation of and longing for the promised blessings of righteousness. Basically, as long as I keep doing my best, things are going to be okay. That is what God has promised. Even if my child one day decides to leave my faith, even if my child one day decides to stop talking to me completely, which I don't want that to happen, of course, but it's possible because our children have agency. I believe so much in God's promises that I still have hope. Here is his promise, Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. This verse applies to parents because if you're a parent, you're called according to God's purpose. God's purpose is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. And in order for that to happen, there has to be parents on earth who have children and raise children. And so you are called according to his purpose. And that means that as long as you love God, all things will work together for good. Also, I like to think about my temple covenants. One of the promised blessings is that there will be priesthood power upon me and upon my posterity. As long as I'm doing what I can to keep my covenants, that's completely within my control, my posterity is going to be blessed, and there is going to be priesthood power in my posterity. Even if they put down a crazy path that I never would have chosen for them, I have a confident expectation of, I have hope in God's promises. I know that no matter what, God is working things out for our good. The third attribute of how we can successfully relate to our children is charity. Charity can be summed up really well by the idea that no matter what, I love my child and I treat my child the way that Jesus Christ would. The scriptures give us really good descriptions of what charity entails. I want to read one of my favorite sections of scripture that talks about charity. This is in 1 Corinthians 13, and it's verses 4-8. It says, "Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth." These verses are helpful because they show us that charity is something that is completely within our control. We can have charity for someone, even if it is really challenging to love them because of the way they're acting. Otherwise, why would it say charity suffereth long or is not easily provoked? It's very possible to have charity even when you're being provoked. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it is very possible because we're asked to have charity, and God wouldn't ask us to do something that's impossible. The final attribute that Doctrine and Covenants 4:5 talks about and that can define the way that we relate to our child is having an eye single to the glory of God. It can be so easy to want to bring glory to yourself as a parent. I know that when I'm focused on being a perfect parent or making sure my child behaves perfectly, I'm not focused on God's glory. I'm focused on mine. And I'm not focused on my child's well-being. I'm focused on mine. I'm focused on me looking good to other people and feeling good about myself. When in reality, anytime our child succeeds, whether it's in learning to walk or learning to speak or getting a good grade or deciding to serve a mission, whatever choices our child makes that are good, they're just God's victory and the child's victory, because God is the one that set in motion all of the events that made that child's choice possible. God is the one that created the earth. He's the one that put us in a family together. He's the one that created my child's body. Taking the mission example, he's the one that gave us the gospel. Everything my child has chosen to do is because of things that God has prepared for them. And it's also my child's victory too, because they're the one that used their agency to do the thing that they're doing. I, as a parent, just got out of their way. I got out of God's way and I got out of my child's way. Potentially the only thing I did was help my child see who they really are. And then my child acted on who they really are. And they made a good choice. But it's not because of me. It's because of my child, and it's because of God who put the light of Christ in my child. To summarize what we talked about today, I encourage you to measure your success as a parent based on your relationship with your child. And when I say that, I mean the way that you relate to your child. How you think and feel about your child. Is the way that you think and feel about your child the way that Jesus Christ thinks and feels about your child? And some ways to tell if you are relating to your child in the way that Jesus Christ would is if you have faith. If you see your child's potential no matter what they do. If you have hope, you know that God is working things together for the good of you and your child no matter what happens. You have charity. No matter what your child does, you treat your child the way that Jesus Christ would, and you love them the way that Jesus Christ would. And then, do you have an eye single to the glory of God? Are you trying to bring glory to yourself, or are you focused entirely on your child's well-being and giving God the glory for any victory that your child has? Let's stop measuring success as a parent by how perfect other people think we are, or by how perfectly our kids perform, and instead measure it by the one thing that is in our control, and that's our relationship with our child, how we relate to them, how we see them, how we think and feel about them. Thanks for listening, you guys. If you like what you're hearing, leave a review and leave a rating. Share your favorite episode with someone that would benefit from this. I want to get this message out so that more parents can see Jesus Christ in their parenting and really reflect on what they're doing, the way they think about themselves and their children, so that they can feel Jesus Christ's love, even in the smallest, tiniest moments. And with that, I'll sign off, and I will talk to you next week.